Back to you, Julius. I know you had mentioned that you were surprised when you came to India just seeing the quality of the infrastructure, because when you read some of the seers' books, you really were fascinated and respected how deep and how knowledgeable and just how thorough they were. It sounds like maybe the country gave you a different impression?
Yeah, but I mean...
What were some of your experiences?
Well, that was mentioned earlier, maybe. I mean, I might have been just biased without even noticing it. It's just that, I mean, sometimes when I look at the scriptures that have come from this country, they are just like so, you know, they are the, you know, on the top, you know, something really like, sometimes you can't even believe that something like this has come out of man, you know. And then, but yeah, I mean, that might have been a bias, and I'm well aware that in India, I mean, the population thing is a thing. It's a poorer country. But still, yeah, when I came here, I still think that I was actually quite surprised by a few things. Just like, I wonder if I should narrate the whole arriving on the airport.
Please do.
I'm not sure if these stories are that interesting, but maybe I can.
Yeah, what were some of those experiences? I know you had mentioned that it was a little chaotic and some things took you by surprise.
Yeah, I guess I was warned in advance that things might not work that fast or that well in general. I don't remember thinking much about it. I was just like, well, it cannot be that bad, you know. But yeah, right at the immigration counter, I think I stood there for like 20 minutes at least, because the machine the guy was using had some error, and he was like pressing the keys like this, and I'm standing there, okay, and then we had to change the machine, and yeah, then I got out, and I was really tired after the flight, and I wanted to buy a coffee, and I was actually a little embarrassed because there was some young girl on the counter, and I'm like, yes, one coffee, do you take Visa? And then she was like, oh, of course we take Visa, and I was like, oh my god. It was this really embarrassing, and she starts making the coffee, and obviously she starts putting milk in it. I didn't realize to say that it's just coffee, no milk. And then she was like, you should have said this to me, and again I was like, okay, well, okay. And then I got out of the airport.
I heard you had to drive the taxi to the hotel? Is that what happened?
Well, yes, and then the traffic came. Yeah. The traffic is really, that was exotic, very exotic. And the funny thing is that whenever I talk about that with people here, they are like, no, this is nothing. That I think that this Greater Noida, Delhi area, at least the times I've been there, I've been told that they're not even that trafficky, you know. But for me, it was very intense, very intense. And then, yeah, the guy who drove me to the hotel, he didn't speak a word of English. And when we got there, even though he had the GPS, I had to actually he drove past the hotel at least 2 times. 3rd time's the charm. Then he actually got there, but I had to really guide him to the place, and yeah, I guess the last strike was the fact that when I was leaving, he was like, "Ma'am, what about my tip? My tip." So he did know some English after all. But all these things, you know, I guess it's funny that in the very first hours of me being here, just many of these kind of strange little things, that things are not just very smooth.
Things are not very smooth.
Maybe I might be biased, maybe I am, but it was still, as I said, I was coming to the land of the Upanishads.
Yeah, but the common man, you thought you were coming to the land of the Upanishads. But the common man, most Indians have not even heard the word Upanishad. Among the few who have heard the word Upanishad, there would be very fewer still, who can name even 3 Upanishads. So to think that the ordinary cab driver would have a spiritual attitude towards life is just too much. Yeah? You won't get it here. The disorder that you encounter, that's an interesting thing. You see, the West relies a lot upon itself. Huh? I have to do it. The ego reigns supreme. I have to do it. So when you have to do it, you can establish an order. This is what I want. This is the way things should happen. And things are then made to happen that way. India has had a religious heritage, and religion is some kind of poor cousin of spirituality. So this much Indians know vaguely by way of their heritage, that man's will, intentions, desires are not all that important. That doership is not really the highest thing. And all order, mind you, in the West stems from doership. You made it happen. The order on the roads in the Europe is not biological, neither is it divine order. It's a man-made order. The East knows that there is something above man-made stuff. So any man-made order, therefore, cannot be given respect beyond a point. And that's the reason why the East is fundamentally disrespectful towards order. Even if they have to follow order, it is with reluctance, under the threat of penalty. I'll be penalized or prosecuted, so I'll follow order. Deep within, they do not want to be orderly because the vibes here, the very air tells them that above the order made by man is the order made by God. Therefore, the order made by man is a secondary kind of thing. Now, what is the order made by God? That the East has no idea of. It's just that they know that there is something above us. Now, what is really above man? That is not the subject of traditional religion. It is the subject matter of rigorous spiritual inquiry. And that is something most people in here have not gone into. So it's a hodgepodge. You know that your own will is insufficient and secondary, but you do not know what is beyond your will. So you are left nowhere. You are just stranded in the middle of existence. Man-made order, you follow not. And any order above the man-made one, you know not. So what are you left with? Just terrible disorder. And that's what you witness on Indian streets. And if you do get a semblance of order at some places in India, I repeat, that is not because of respect towards either man's effort or the truth. That is out of just fear of penalty. There are these two kinds of orders you would have gathered by now. One is the order that you witness in the West. Everything follows systems, or in Japan, for example, even in China. All you have is systems. and systems are to be respected. Systems are made for a reason. You can't just gladly, happily, randomly deviate from systems. So there is that order, and there is another order that is higher than that order, which is the order of the truth, which is the order of love. You don't need to discipline people if they really don't love. Equally, you don't need to discipline people if they really are wise. So both wisdom and love lead to a higher kind of order. Between these two orders is terrible disorder, and that's where most Indians lie. Neither here nor there, nor are they as deeply material as those in the West. Had that been the case, you would have seen order on the streets here or at other places as well. Nor are Indians deeply spiritual. We talked of the Upanishads, how few people know of them. We talked of the songs of the saints, how few people remember or sing those songs. So this order, they do not cultivate, the material one. That order, they cannot come close to. What are we Indians then left with? Just disorder, just disorder. Now there are then two ways to get orderly. One is become more material, and the more material you become, the more orderly you are. Even in India, there are very, very material places where you would find order comparable to the West. For example, if you go to an institution of higher professional learning, or you go to an IT campus, an IT park, that is, a huge park where you have lots of huge offices of information technology companies with a lot of young people, and you will find those places working very smoothly, very orderly. You have cabs coming in and out at the appointed time, and there are systems and everything, and you'll also find a few Westerners sprinkled there because that's where the clientage is from. So that's one way to get orderly, right? Become more westernized. The more westernized you are, the more orderly you will be. But that order, according to me, is of very little worth. The real order comes from elsewhere, where you don't have to impose conditions on people, where you don't have to threaten them with penalties and fines, and yet people are orderly. That's a very difficult kind of order to achieve. But I think both the West and the East need to work towards that order. Order born through discipline is order based on fear. And this kind of order is not sustainable. In fact, the longer it sustains, the more dangerous it becomes, because it breeds neurosis. You are disciplined from the outside, afraid from within, and the whole thing kept boiling within, and this simmering thing is bound to blow up one day. And once the lid blows off, anything is possible. You see, don't you see, the West is the most orderly place, and the West is also the place where the most brutal battles have been fought. The West is the place that has accumulated the worst kind of weapons. And weapons, don't tell me, breed order, or do they? Weapons are there to destroy whatever is orderly. Your orderliness might have raised buildings and cities. What are those weapons for then? To destroy all man-made order, to bring you back to the Stone Age.
In many ways, what I've observed in the US and read is that my experience is that it's also the most violent country. So despite a lot of material wealth, it breeds a lot of paranoia. People feel that they have to have guns to protect themselves.
Right.
There's a lot of fear about crime. And most armed conflicts in the last 100 years have had American fingerprints on them.
That's true.
So maybe it's good in a way that India is not that orderly, because we just be inviting violence.
See, look at it from the saints' perspectives. They too want things to be orderly. They talk of a higher divine order. Equally, what they say is that if you live too much and too strictly in conditions made by your mind, then the ego gets a lot of security. So, too much order is not even desirable. Maybe it's all right to leave things a bit disorderly and suffer a few losses, not be that efficient in terms of output or time, and yet have a more lively and fulfilling life. No, it's not that the saints advocated disorder. However, they did bring out the problems with man-made order, with a very, very meticulously planned life. When life is planned to that extent, where is the scope for spontaneity? No, I'm not saying that Indians, by dint of their disorderliness, are living spontaneous lives. I'm not saying that. I'm just picking holes in the order at all cost approach of the West. So, the saints did say a thing or two against too much discipline and order and even punctuality and all the things that are practiced in rigorous religion as well as rigorous materialism. And their idea was to leave yourself a bit to the flow of circumstances. I'll quote a couplet to you. तुलसी भरोसे राम के निर्भय होके सोए. Saint Tulsidas is the poet here, and he's saying, by the grace of Ram, I sleep without fear. I sleep without fear. Not that I have accumulated great wealth or great protection. Not that I keep a couple of guns by my side when I sleep. I just leave myself to the security, to the grace of Ram. Ram implies the truth here. And I just sleep peacefully, fearlessly. Anhoni honi nahi, honi hoye so hoye. That which cannot happen will not happen, and that which is bound to happen, let it happen. This has been the approach of India. So the saints have kind of made fun of living a secured and disciplined life. At times they have even scoffed at it, gone to that extent. But that is when you can leave yourself to Ram. When you can be a Tulsi. That's when you do not need to have material order and security, and you can live an apparently insecure life joyfully. Now, what most Indians have done is that they have picked up the contempt towards orderliness from saints, but have rejected the Ram that saints used to love. Oh, lip service we all pay to Ram, but the real Ram of Tulsi, the heart itself, the truth itself, the Atma itself, that Ram, most Indians have not much to do with. So see what has happened. It's a curious thing. We'll quote Tulsidas and say, what is the need for so much preparation and planning? Just live in a carefree way. Just live in a carefree way. But Tulsi's freedom from care came along with, or rather due to, his proximity to Ram. Now that proximity to Ram, we have forgotten. But the carefree thing, we have picked up. And when you try to be carefree without being ego-free, then this is carelessness. There is a difference between being carefree and being careless. When you are with Ram, without care, then you are carefree. But when you are without Ram and still without care, then you are just careless. So most people become careless, thinking that they are just being carefree.
I'm actually reminded, there was this incident when I had to cross this huge roundabout, like the traffic was very heavy there, and I didn't realize that I can actually just walk through the street. I thought that I would have to find a pedestrian road or something like this, and there was some policeman parked there, and I went to he didn't speak any English, but he kind of understand my whole how do I get across, and he's like, just go. And then I went, and it was very very exhilarating at least, but seriously, and you see it everywhere here, that's if there's not a car there, you can actually walk there, and it still amazes me that it somehow seems to work, this kind of carelessness that you talked about. I kind of it's not the same, but maybe I could see a small connection there, but it's still, I just sometimes feel that it's not like an accident is half a second away if someone just watches to the wrong direction at the wrong moment.
The frequency of road accidents, or rather the deaths per capita on the road in India, are among the highest in the world, and you have put your finger on the reason. See, that's what Ram does not want you to be careless. Ram wants you to leave care to Ram. That's not being careless. That's being careful to the Ram level. What is Ram? The highest. When you have the highest level of care, then you are carefree. Carefree in the sense, now the ego can be left carefree, because care has been assigned to the highest. The highest will take care and the ego can relax. But who is the highest? The highest is not a figment of your imagination. The highest is not somewhere outside of you. The highest is within you. The highest is within you. The highest is the highest within you. The highest is the highest within you. So, to be carefree means to assign care to the highest within you. Think from the highest point of your mind act from the highest point of your mind. That's called being carefree. Carefree does not mean that you have thrown care out of the window. Being free of order does not mean that you are disorderly. To be free of order, you have to leave order to Ram, and Ram is the highest within you. So when from your own highest point, you let an order emerge, you let care emerge, you let discipline emerge, you let direction emerge. That's the thing that the saints aspired for and taught. Now half their teaching has been kept. That's why I called religion as a distant cousin of spirituality. Something they share in common, these two. So this much has been kept, that you need not be too careful by yourself for yourself. Ram will take care of you. But the more important half, who exactly is Ram? Or who exactly is Krishna? Or who exactly is Param, the highest? That people have not gone into, because that in some sense is barred by religion itself. Religion says the highest we have already supplied to you. We are telling you who is the highest. This God is the highest, Ishwar is highest, Bhagwan is highest, that deity is the highest, that place is the highest. And we are also telling you what you can do to reach the highest. You perform these austerities, you observe these ceremonies, you fast on these particular days, you donate clothes to the poor, you do such and such things, you go to that place of pilgrimage, and you will reach the highest. So religion has given ready-made answers. Religion has given ready-made answers. So, and those answers are all fictitious, all false. So then there is no need left to really explore the highest. And therefore people never reach the highest. Right? Spirituality says the lowest point in yourself has to be discarded, or rather all the lowly points have to be discarded, and the higher ones have to be aspired for. The highest one is liberation. That's what spirituality is all about. Religion says 50% of the same thing. This much religion does say. Reject yourself. There is something higher than you sitting upstairs. Right? That's why God is often seen as ruling the skies. He is sitting upstairs. So this much religion does say, that cousin of spirituality, that do not be too serious about yourself, and your doing amounts to not much. But the remaining half, what is the real deal? Who is the real one? That religion does not go into. That religion does not go into because religion pretends that it already knows the real one. It keeps telling you, such and such God is the highest one. Right? In the West, one particular name is the highest one. In the East, another name is the highest one. In the Middle East, some other name is the highest one. So these ready-made names, these assured supplies of beliefs leave us nowhere. Leave us nowhere. We do not ever come to know of the real thing. The real thing cannot be handed over to us on a platter. It's a matter of individual investigation. It's a matter of self-inquiry. The West has been lucky in a sense that any concept of the higher thing has not been allowed to survive. The West has been left all on its own. There is nothing higher than you. If you want your welfare, work for yourself. Nothing higher than what you see, nothing higher than what you can touch, nothing higher than your body. And nobody anywhere to take care of you. Nothing higher than your own desire, your own intellect. your own will. There's nothing higher than that. That's what the West feeds on. And that has been good to an extent. At least the West is responsible. There's nobody else going to come and take care of me. So I have to create my own systems, do my own things. Right? The East, this much we remember in East. There is somebody higher than us. But who is that one? We are all very muddled about. And there is a reason why. Because that knowledge does not come cheap. The real one is not merely an idea to be known. The real one is a dissolution to be attained at a high price. So we do not reach there. This much we come to know there is somebody higher than me. And that leads to fatalism. We become fatalistic here in the East. We say, God will take care of me, this and that. This concept of God has hurt the East a lot. Vedanta does not talk of God. Vedanta talks of Atma. And Atma is the real you. Vedanta says you have to take your destiny in your own hands. Not only are you all powerful, actually there is no one beside you. You are the only reality. Therefore there is no other power to obstruct you, and there is no other power to support you. You are your only friend and your only enemy. Therefore, wake up, rise. Rise to your highest potentiality. That's the message of Vedanta. Unfortunately, most Indians follow organized religion that has very little space for the real thing, Vedanta. Even though the Hindus call the Vedas as their central scriptures, yet the very center of Vedas, the very nectar of Vedas, Vedanta, has not found a place in the common Indian psyche. The man on the road has hardly anything to do with Vedanta.
Could you make a differentiation? Because as you said that Vedanta is about taking full responsibility. In some sense it sounds a bit similar to what we are doing in the West. What's the difference there?
In the West you take responsibility remaining who you are. Vedanta says your primary responsibility is to not to remain who you are. In West, when you say, I do not want to remain who I am, that means you want to get a bigger car. In the East, rather, when Vedanta says you must not remain who you are, it means freedom from the ego. Because the ego is who you currently are in your imagination. So there is a great difference. Great difference. In the West, being responsible for yourself means being lonely in a vast world. In the East, in Vedanta, being responsible for yourself means realizing that the world is but your own projection and therefore you are not lonely. In the West, when you are responsible for yourself, you become alienated from the rest of the world. In the East, when you are responsible for yourself, you become one with the world, one with community, one with humanity, and you raise everybody alongside you. That's the difference. The responsibility that Vedanta talks of is a very holistic responsibility. It's not a divided responsibility. It does not foster the ego. It does not tell you that you are one little thing in a vast universe, as they say, a speck of dust in an infinite place. No, not that. Vedanta tells you you are everything. You are the only reality, and the world is but your own game, your own football ground, your own theatre, however you like to put it. And therefore, don't be afraid. Not only that, you are not this body that's going to crumble and die. Therefore, do not be fearful even of death. That's the extent Vedanta wants you to be fearless. And when you are fearless to that extent, you become non-violent. Violence can come only in the backdrop of fear. When you are so fearless, you actually become compassionate. So Vedanta is fearlessness and compassion. Not individualization. The individuality that Vedanta refers to is very different to the individualization that we find in the West. The individualization that you find in the West is fragmentation, is isolation. Here, it is a dissolution. I am indivisible now because I have dissolved. Just as you cannot divide a drop of water from the ocean. Similarly, I am an individual now. That's the sense in which the word individual is used in Vedanta. Whereas in the West, when you say you are an individual, that's always the individual versus the society in that kind of a concept. You getting it? So it's diametrically opposite.
Still, it's a strange thing that, well, as you said, that even in India, real spirituality hasn't really, what's a good word, taken roots.
Its distant cousin rules.
Yeah. And at the same time, even in the West, as we said earlier, I don't really find much people leaning towards what you are saying here.
It's a very difficult thing.
Yeah, and I mean, as the kind of taking responsibility for yourself as the ego, I mean, it's very, very like fear-based, that I have to do it. It might seem...
It's fear-based, it makes you lonely, it makes you violent. Nobody to care for me.
Yeah.
Nobody to care for me.
Yeah.
And it makes you very hard. Very hard. Hard not in the sense of sturdy and strong. Hard in the sense of empathyless.
An internal stiffness.
An internal stiffness that does not care for anything except its own interests. And that we also call in the West, quite interestingly, as liberty. No? I will do as I please. Don't you see that has a lot of fear in it? Don't you see that has a lot of loneliness in it?
And the statistics do bear that out, that in the West, people are very fearful of growing old because they worry that no one will look after them, they'll be lonely, they'll be abandoned. When depression, anxiety are all sky high in the West. I know in the US, they estimate at least 1 in 4 people are on antidepressants or anti-anxiety pills. And that's the hidden or not so glamorous cost of the individuality and the freedom and the order.
Right.
And it's also a strange thing because even though sometimes when I look at the disorder or the chaos or just people hanging out on the street, I have to admit that sometimes I wish I could be as carefree, even a little, you know, not in that way, but you get what I mean.
You're leaving on Tuesday, we can make you hang out on the street, cook some food and sell it to people.
No, that's a very common feeling amongst people from the West who are about to leave India or who freshly land in the West after being in India for months. I've heard that before. One French woman in particular, she wrote to me that I have returned to the dry order of France, of Paris, from the lively chaos of India. That was only part satire. She was actually missing the chaos here.
I get that completely, because I'm already having the same kind of feeling. You get used to it.
There's something heartfelt about the liveliness and the chaos. I can't put my
Not exactly.
finger on it. There's a warmth in it, perhaps?
There's a
that's
warmth in
not
it,
the
yes,
US?
that's true, but it's just too much warm. You would want it rather a bit colder. But you see where it comes from. It still carries that ancient echo of the saints, and that's the reason you feel mildly attracted towards it, because it carries only that distant ego. It's not the real thing. However, it has a touch of the real thing. No Indian can avoid that. You see, the voice of the saints is still there. It's reverberating. So even if you are not overtly religious, in India it is impossible to pick up a religious tint, at least. It's there in the air.
Is it in danger of disappearing, though? I know we were in Delhi and Connaught Place, and we were walking around, and it seems like all the Western brands are there. All the young Indian men and women are trying to be Westernized. All the Western brands are selling consumer products with an Indian/Western tint to it. Are we in danger of being, is consumerism likely to just wipe out whatever vestiges of the saints we have?
It's doing that, but the work of the saints is quite deep-rooted. So all this consumerism, this shallow philosophy of life will take a while to uproot the whole thing. But you are very right, very dark forces are at work and they are in great hurry. So Indians are losing whatever little trace of spiritual wisdom was left with them, and that's happening pretty fast. It's happening. You talked of Connaught Place. You'd have struggled to see a single word in the Devanagari script. You remove the people from there, and if you're left with just the banners and the boards and the brands, it would be very difficult for you to tell whether it is Delhi or some western city. Maybe the filth would drop a hint, but if you clear that also, Connaught Place is so much like, let's say, a place in Paris. Yes, obviously, comparable.
Or
yes,
anywhere in Europe,
or anywhere in
the
Europe.
major
Yeah, of
cities,
course.
yeah.
Just remove the people so that you don't see brown skin, and then there is no difference. So yes, India is trying very hard to become a cheap copy of the West, and had that been of some use, I would have gladly accepted, rather participated. But that's of no use. That's of no use. The West does not remain, the West rather does not want to remain the way it is. Why do we want to ape the West? The West is hardly happy being itself, and we want to become that. Makes no sense at all. And I'm not talking of Western technology, I'm not talking of the work culture in West. We should admire that, and we should emulate that even. But when it comes to copying values and philosophy of life, then West is not the place to look towards. India has the stuff, fortunately, that even the West should be looking towards. So it's pretty stupid if Indians are all the time trying to ape West and migrate to West and all those things. See, even migration to West, I understand. Somebody could do that for purely financial reasons, and that's pretty much okay. But trying to become a Westerner is a totally different thing, no? In language, in culture, in food, in values, in in the extent of disregard of your spiritual heritage. You want to be as unaware of, let's say, Vedanta as a typical Westerner is, and then you want to say, no, that's what makes me a Westerner. Westerners do not know Vedanta. I too have refused to know a word of Vedanta, and that's what makes me a Westerner. Even Hindi or any other Indian language, I would speak in a Western accent, and that's considered so cool. So cool. That's ultra hip. If you can speak Hindi in, let's say, in an Irish accent. Bhaiya,
Actually, I think.
yeah, bhaiya, lash phat nagar chaloge kya?
How can that be a thing?
And we'd never be able to copy them as well as they are themselves. So why are we playing a
No
losing game
copy
again?
can rival the original. No copy ever can rival the original. You can just be pale imitations, and how can that be a good thing?
But I mean, we are doing the same thing, because if you see the neo-spiritual circles of the West, I mean, yeah, they pose themselves as very carefree, but deep down they are just as
Afraid.
insecure. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, I guess there's not much places to go if the West and the East are both like.
That tells you that which you are looking for is not spatial, is not temporal. So you will not get it in the future. Equally, you will not get it at a particular place. There is that beyond space and time, which simply means that stop looking for it at particular places. It is not in Finland, it's also not in the Indian spaces. It's somewhere else.
Outer space is also ruled out. Outer space is also ruled out.
All the space is ruled out. All the space is ruled. See, it's not that we are ruling out time and space. Fundamentally, remember, because you have been with me for a while now, we are ruling out the one to whom time and space exist. Who is the experiencer of time and space? You and me. So we have to rule ourselves out. It's not that we are disdainful of spaces or we are unmindful of time. Time has to be respected. Places exist as a fact, and places can be useful. However, the ego, that is itself a creation of time and space, wants to consider time and space as the ultimate. That's the tendency we have to watch out against. In that sense, it is said that that is beyond time and space, so that the ego cannot be too happy. The ego does not go too far in its quest of self-delusion. Time and space are not objective things. So it's not stuff we are disregarding. We are disregarding the one to whom the stuff exists.
This is something very hard to the scientific mind of the West to accept.
Yeah, because science feasts on its proclaimed objectivism. Things exist objectively, and there's no reason to doubt whether they exist at all. Why is there no reason to doubt? Because I see that they exist, and I see no reason to doubt myself. That's what the ego says. I cannot doubt myself, and if I cannot doubt myself, how do I doubt this pillar that I see? I don't doubt myself, and this pillar, its existence is being ratified by me. So how can I ever call the world as unreal? Forget about calling it unreal. How can I even initiate an inquiry into the perceived reality of the universe? That's what science lives on. The universe is real. Now let me find out more about the universe. And that's the reason science has to compulsorily disregard the ego. Science has to be completely objective and totally be oblivious of the
ego,
the subject, the observer. The all sciences talk just of the observed phenomena, not the one who is observing them. Now, if it turns out that observed phenomena are actually a function of the observer, then science falls flat, and that's science's worst nightmare. What if all that this is being seen and observed and measured is simply a function of, a reflection of the observer? Then none of it is objective. Then all the theories we have come up with are actually not theories of the observed phenomena, they are theories of the observing mind. Now there is a big problem for science. So science will just not talk of the observer, of the ego, of the self. And that's the attitude the West carries. Self-observation, self-knowledge is more difficult to a Westerner than to an Easterner.
Definitely.
Because a Westerner is born and raised up on a diet of compulsive objectivity. So when it is then told that look at yourself, it becomes incredibly difficult. Not impossible. So many Westerners very gloriously succeed, but it's more difficult there than here.